Trade war is also bad news for some American auto workers right now.
GM to increase truck production in Indiana following Trump's tariffs.
States, it definitely affects us. And if we're not...
Business groups like the Detroit Regional Chamber and Michigan Auto.
Trump's dream tariffs, his supposed master key to any economic plan, turned into a game of Russian roulette for America's auto industry. The former president was convinced that slapping a 25% duty on foreign parts and vehicles would restore lost greatness. But when Trump talks about making America great again, anything can happen, including driving car makers into an abyss. Stellantis, parent company of Jeep, Dodge, Chrysler, and Ram, learned this the hard way. The measure hit like a wrecking ball, forcing the firm to announce 7,000 layoffs and shut several plants. The promise of more jobs evaporated, leaving a flood of unemployment behind. One longtime worker summed it up sadly. After years on the line, she still wound up on the chopping block. The politician who vowed to multiply jobs turned the worker's dream into a grinding ordeal. Trying to defend this tactic now sounds like a macabre joke born of unchecked ego. Neither Canada nor Mexico planned to sit on their hands. They branded Trump's move a tasteless prank and even cheered while the United States shot itself in the foot. Europe and China, watching from the stands, wore half smiles. After years of being accused of supply chain manipulation, they now see Washington caught in its own web. International headlines already speak of economic harakiri. Blind protectionism has driven the U.S. economy into a corner and sliced the competitiveness of its industrial giants. Independent projections warn that the new tariff could slash more than 2 million units a year from combined U.S.-Canadian sales. A perverse game where everyone loses. Brands as entrenched as Jeep, Dodge, and Ram teeter on the brink because they rely on Mexican and Canadian components. A supply chain held together with pins snapped like a rusty tailpipe at full speed. The Jeep Compass, a household favorite, grows more expensive every week. The Ram 1500, once a blue-collar badge of honor, will soon top $50,000, turning a popular workhorse into a trophy for elite wallets. The moment the tariff went public, Stellantis bolted the doors at its Windsor plant, birthplace of Chrysler models, and 4,500 families lost their livelihood. In Toluca, where Jeep and Dodge roll off the line, another 2,500 workers met the same fate. And in the U.S., 900 employees were furloughed for lack of parts. 24 hours were enough to freeze production, while Trump kept insisting his plan would revive the nation. Reality delivered a direct blow to the industry that claims to build the American dream on four wheels. As the tariff storm raged, manufacturing costs skyrocketed. Analysts figure the sector will absorb nearly $107.7 billion in extra expenses. Stellantis alone will eat $41.9 billion. Cars could rise by $2,000 to $4,000 each. The Compass will hover near $30,000. The Ram 1500 around $50,000. We're living the American dream, the ex-president might quip. A dream only the aristocracy can now afford. What once symbolized freedom and power on asphalt is morphing into a luxury indulgence. In March 2025, Trump doubled down with a 25% duty on vehicles arriving from Canada, touting domestic protection. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't flinch. He aimed straight at EV parts, battery minerals, and cross-border components vital to Tesla and Ford. Supplies dried up, dealerships ran out of inventory, and Wall Street wiped $50 billion in market value in just 1 week. Prices spiked, and the trade war plunged the economy into chronic turbulence. S&P Global Mobility predicts U.S. sales will drop 700,000 vehicles in 2025, and North American output could slow by 20,000 units a day, crushing both makers and buyers. Tesla, dependent on Canadian nickel, lithium, and aluminum, saw its Nevada and California lines crawl. Delivery times ballooned from 2 weeks to 2 months, dragging the 6 million unit goal underwater. The stock rout forced UBS and Mizuho to cut target prices to $190 and $375 respectively. Ford fares no better. Over a quarter of the output from Michigan and Kentucky sat stranded, eroding revenue and driving costs higher. New cars already cost 15% more, and used models surge in value. A high-mileage pickup now fetches more than a factory-fresh one simply because it exists. More than 50,000 workers lost paychecks in the first month of Canadian retaliation. Ohio, Michigan, and Kentucky suffer cascading layoffs. Ottawa's playbook goes beyond simple tit-for-tat. Carney tightened border inspections and stretched clearance times, strangling logistics without brutal sanctions. The move casts Canada as a free trade defender and lures Asian and European capital. Auto titans are weighing future investments elsewhere, eroding U.S. clout on the global board. China and the European Union waste no time. They tap Canadian minerals to power an electric onslaught, while Chinese plants in Mexico prepare to feed the U.S. market tariff-free. European firms, once loyal to America, redirect funds to Canada and Mexico. Fiercer competition forces Tesla, Ford, and GM to reinvent themselves under foreign pressure. Trump banked on tariffs to tether companies, yet they bolted like litigants fleeing a storm. Toyota and Honda shifted production to Mexico, forfeiting $12 and $8 billion. His line, "We will slap 25% on any car built elsewhere," played like exit music for Nissan, Hyundai, and Kia. South of the border, taxes vanish and risk plunges. The hit to consumers isn't rumor. An SUV may cost $3,000 to $5,000 extra. Toyota holds prices for now, eating engine, transmission, and other costs. But if levies linger, quality will dip, volumes will shrink, small suppliers will fall, and price tags will keep climbing. One missing component can halt a line, and 80% of suppliers have fewer than 50 employees. Without backing, they'll fold within a year. Trump's doctrine not only scares the giants, it pulverizes small firms and leaves workers footing the bill. Repairs cost more. Dealers pass every cent to customers, and auto loans hover near 7%, a peak unseen for years. Experts foresee 10 to 15% hikes on imports this year thanks to the brilliance of the tariff. Result: 2 million vehicles won't sell in 2025 because buyers can't afford them. With inflation and high rates, drivers nurse aging rides until they drop. Unemployment claims rocketed to 242,000, well above forecasts, signaling sharp decline. Chains like Domino's, Krispy Kreme, and Bed Bath & Beyond shut stores. Tech, retail, and finance slash headcount. WPP shed 16% of its value in a single day. Lower income means lower spending, more closures, more layoffs, the perfect recession spiral. Without a shock plan, the economy edges toward depression. Consumer confidence has cratered to a 10-year low. Amazon, Walmart, and Target post massive revenue drops, while thousands of small shops shutter for good. Manufacturing stalls, global supply lines jam, and job losses mount, feeding the loop. Trump, meanwhile, focuses on fundraising. His emails plead "Save America" for donations, dangling MAGA ambassador titles. Proceeds bankroll rallies, lawyers, and self-promotion. And even loyalists question the lack of a real economic blueprint. Adding drama, housing wobbles, sales hit rock bottom, mortgages soar, rents smash records, crushing middle-class dreams. With investors fleeing and banks tightening credit, a 2008 déjà vu looms. Tourism fronts a historic boycott. Over 90% of Canadian travelers cancel U.S. vacations, a political act more than leisure. Canada supplies 40% of visitors to spots like Old Orchard Beach. Hotels and restaurants suffer huge losses. The freeze slices $1.2 billion a year and cripples transport, lodging, and retail. Tourism has become soft power weaponry. Refusing to travel sends a blunt message against U.S. foreign policy and may embolden other nations. When a country shuns your offerings on principle, it's a defense of values and sovereignty, not mere displeasure. The tariff shockwave didn't stop at autos. It battered sectors once thought immune. Appliance factories in Ohio and South Carolina now lack electric motors and microcontrollers that used to breeze in from Canada. In under 3 months, assembly lines dropped from 3 shifts to barely 1.5, slashing hours and wages for thousands. The pinch spread to refrigeration, HVAC, and farm machinery, yielding barren hardware store shelves and clerks telling customers no spare parts, at least until fall. Freight took collateral damage. With fewer cars rolling out, rail giants Union Pacific and BNSF mothballed routes dedicated to new vehicles, idling thousands of containers and engines in Midwestern yards. Trucking firms, unable to find steady loads, hiked rates to cover half-empty runs, inflating prices on staples in supermarkets across Nebraska, Iowa, and North Dakota. At truck stop diners, drivers trade stories of canceled deliveries, empty motels, and roadside cafes trimming menus because meat and dairy supply chains are equally out of sync. Psychological shock gripped financial markets. A storied Chicago brokerage reported retail clients yanked $1 billion from equities in a single Black Friday of April, fearing deeper crashes. The Federal Reserve rushed out calming statements while analysts warned sustained fear could drain liquidity. Small and mid-sized firms' need for credit, lacking fresh capital, specialty foundries and parts shops scrapped expansion plans, stalling job creation in towns reliant on a handful of plants. In Washington, stimulus talks bogged down amid finger-pointing. Lawmakers from industrial states demanded supply chain subsidies. Agricultural reps called for immediate relief on corn and soy after pickup shortages undercut biofuel demand. Mayors of battered cities sent joint letters to the White House describing scenes reminiscent of 2008. Families walking away from mortgages, public schools losing hundreds of students as parents moved for work, clinics postponing surgeries for lack of imported supplies, rural hospitals warning that soaring energy costs imperil entire ICU wings. Businesses scrambled for improbable fixes. Some brands set up makeshift lines in disused military hangars to bypass clogged ports and tap second-tier domestic suppliers. But volumes reach barely a fifth of pre-war levels. Others convert gas cars to electric with kits routed through third countries, spawning a gray market that baffles emissions regulators. Silicon Valley startups promise to 3D print plastic parts at scale to ease shortages, though lab-proven durability remains in doubt. Diplomatically, nations like Brazil and Vietnam sensed opportunity as transit hubs, offering ports and rail to reroute metals and batteries to the U.S. without crossing North American borders directly. A legally tangled scheme that still tempts desperate importers. Meanwhile, the World Trade Organization logged a flood of formal complaints against Washington for multilateral violations, setting the stage for penalties that could extend the crisis beyond autos. Citizens, facing relentless cost of living hikes, staged spontaneous protests in Detroit and Akron. Placards once boasting, "Bring jobs back," now read, "Bring prices down." Polls show 68% of voters blame tariff policy for economic decay, a dramatic shift that threatens to redraw the electoral map. Trump ramps up rallies in farm states, blaming globalism for the chaos, yet whispers of disillusion seep through once fervent crowds. None of this unfolds in a vacuum. Green innovation, fast-tracked by European giants eager to diversify, could leave North America trailing in hydrogen tech and solid-state batteries. If the tariff blockade drags on, the brightest engineers may emigrate, taking patents and high-value investment with them. For a nation that bragged of leading mobility for a century, the prospect of technological sidelining resembles modern tragedy. So the colossal question remains: how much longer can the U.S. economy endure containment mode? Plant closures, half-choked logistics, and consumers exhausted by inflation shrink the margin for correction with every ticking second. Without a broad pact that unleashes smart incentives, eases trade tensions, and guarantees stability. The tariff paradox, born to protect jobs, will, with surgical precision, dismantle the very foundations it claimed to safeguard. In that light, Canadians have handed Washington a lesson in mutual respect. Will this redraw the diplomatic map? Will more destinations become stages for protest? Stay with us to find out.